Our special speaker tonight is Dr. Candace Corson. She is a National Marketing Director. She's also a 100 Club member, which means that is the highest recognition and honor that you can have in our business. She's a 7-time Elton Award nominee and 2011 Elton 39 Club Member of the Year, which is, again, the highest honor that you can receive in the Club Awards. Her background, though, is one that brings a tremendous amount of knowledge to the product itself. Her background is family and integrative medicine. She served in the United States Public Health Service, National Health Service Corps. She's a national health educator and speaker. Her background is that she was, her degrees are from Yale College, BA summa cum laude, a Yale University School of Medicine, MD, in 1976, University of Rochester Family Medicine residency. So as I said, she comes with a great deal of not only medical knowledge and skill, but knowledge as far as the product and how it interacts in the body. But for herself, Dr. Corson was telling you that she learned about Juice Plus actually from a friend, and it made sense to her because she was looking for better nutrition for her children. Just the way in which, kids eat when they're in school, it can be really a challenge. She and her husband decided to include Juice Plus in their family's grocery money because it made sense to them. But as doctors, they embraced and taught the power of healing through plant-based nutrition already. So because Juice Plus was not only very safe but remarkably effective and thoroughly documented through research, she felt that it was her ethical responsibility to share it. Dr. Corson really believes she can make a bigger difference in people's health by sharing Juice Plus than she can by seeing patients in her office at this point. And so the business was a great fit for her as well and has really made a difference, and she wants to be part of that huge difference and how our nation and the world feeds the current and upcoming generations and being part of transforming that for the better of all. Candace is married to Dr. George Knowles. He's an MD as well, and together they are the parents of 4 sons and the grandparents of a growing family. So tonight she's going to talk about really protecting ourselves and our children against infections, especially as we come on a time of year where, especially for kids, respiratory infections can be a huge issue. But Candace, maybe you can, just touch on how, really the immune system gets such a boost from the right nutrition, and I know you will. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. And I just wanted to share with everybody that there is a lot of hope on the horizon for better health for our nation and for all people around the world. We're on a downward spiral right now with regard to the health of this nation. Anyone paying attention knows that is so. But the good news is that the field of the basic scientists, the PhD kind of scientists in the fields of immune function and nutrition and infectious problems, all of that is really quite advanced. We have a lot of knowledge now to turn things around, but it's not yet being translated into the teaching of medical students, the MD part. And that does need to change, and it really is going to be market forces that will make it change because no nation can afford the level of illness that we now have in our great country. The other thing that will turn it around is the desire of parents and grandparents and people in general to have a good future for their children. And at this point, it is really true, and we're watching this actually happen, is that Dr. David Katz, who's an MD expert from Yale University, has said that our children today, their health and their longevity will be more harmed by their food situation than they are by alcohol, tobacco, and firearms combined. That is a powerful statement, and we see that is what is happening. So we're going to have some good news on this call, but I just want to kind of paint the picture of how important immune function is for any organism, and for us human beings in particular. We do tend to take our health and our immune function for granted much of the time. We have a lot of concerns and stresses going on, and sometimes we take our eye off the prize, which is often health and well-being of those around us and our community. And so I just wanted to share a few stories from my training that really painted the picture of how serious and how important immune function is. And, of course, immune function is extremely elegant and complex, and it changes moment to moment, second to second. You can have a sudden impairment of immune function due to stress, acute stress, chronic stress, the ingestion of sugar, which we do now as if it were a harmless substance, which it is not. A sugar load suppresses immune function. This has been well documented for many years. For up to 6 hours, really, you can obviously see immune suppression. But environmental toxins are a big cause. And then the biggest cause that we see is the deficiency of the nutrients that have to come into the body to allow immune function to be proper. And that would be the plant kingdom. That is very specifically vegetables, fruits, and those dark purple and blue fruits that we call berries. Those are where the phytonutrients, P-H-Y-T-O, meaning plant in Greek, phytonutrients are the mandatory substrate for the good germs to actually grow on in the intestine. So I want to paint that picture just a little bit bigger here in a moment. But the stories that really made immune function precious to me as a doctor and as a mother started a long time ago. My mother was a pharmacologist and taught 2 generations of medical students. My dad was a physiologist, so I grew up in a scientific family, and there was a tremendous respect for the complexity and the elegance of nature. As I did my training, I can remember vividly many of the patients who touched my life forever and were teachers in my life because of being so kind to allow me into their life during their times of crisis in the hospital. And I can remember coming through the emergency department one day as an intern, and I had a rotation to go to upstairs. I was not on the emergency rotation at that time, but that's how I came into the hospital. And as I passed through, I saw a boy about 8 years old on a cart with very concerned people working fast around him. He looked really bad, and I can remember him just breathing so hard and just fighting for his life, and sort of a gray-blue color. And I asked just quietly so I could learn, one of the people that I wasn't interfering, one of the nurses who wasn't involved in the case, what is that happening? And she said, that's bacterial meningitis. So that was a child who had a germ enter the cerebrospinal fluid around the brain and was multiplying rapidly. I don't know what his outcome was. This was before computers and before cell phones, and I didn't have a way to track what happened to that little boy. I always prayed for him and hoped that he had a good outcome, but it did not look good. Again, there was some kind of immune failure that had happened, and this just very acute situation where the hope would be that if you could get powerful antibiotics by vein very fast, it might allow enough time for his immune function to then clean up this mess. If you could just kill enough bacteria fast enough. We were in the antibiotic era then, and we're in the post-antibiotic era now. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. I can remember another time when I was before that in my training, when I was a medical student at Yale. I had a month-and-a-half rotation on the infectious, I did a long rotation on infectious disease, which was very helpful, but one of my rotations that was the most discouraging was on the transplant floor. And this was so early in the days of transplant. We had kidney transplant patients, but we didn't have good immune-suppressing drugs. We had rudimentary drugs that suppressed the immune system too much. It wasn't a gentle enough kind of situation. And during that 6 weeks, every single one of my patients died from infection on that rotation on the transplant ward. And I can remember all of them, just the nicest people, and it was a privilege to be part of their life there. We tried to provide kindness and a lot of care, but it just was an example of why our immune system is so incredibly important. And I have some happy stories I can report in more recent years. A lovely friend of mine who I met in her late 60s had bad COPD, which is our password, you might say, for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, had been a smoker but had stopped a long time ago, but had chronic and recurrent bronchitis, was very winded, a little bit of a blue color, and was really not a well person at all. And a friend of hers who was a nurse had shared with her about Juice Plus, the nutrition that has been shown to improve immune function in human beings in repeated studies, both elderly people, young people, elite athletes, and various groups of people, even healthcare workers exposed to a long, stressful winter in Europe, looking at the difference in immune function between those who were and those who were not, who were using a placebo that looked exactly like Juice Plus nutrition. And what happened with this wonderful friend with COPD was nothing short of amazing to both my husband and me, because we've had long years of experience in medicine, and we have not seen a person with very significant COPD go over a 10-year period and improve dramatically in their lung function and their general health and look much younger. But that's what happened with my friend. And I just saw her at a gathering, an education lecture this past week, looking really good in her late 70s. Just delightful experience. Another happy story is one of a baby boy, 6 months old, who had been in the hospital over and over again with recurrent large abscesses that had to be drained. Miserable situation. Not only is it expensive, but scary and just really a big mess for that family and that baby to go through. And this would just happen over and over again. Very large abscesses, which we call furuncles, or we might call them boils. I call them abscesses. And again, a friend of mine shared with the mom. It took a couple of months of just, offering information. Are you open to seeing what the medical research has showed about immune function and the fact this is food and it's safe for pregnancy, it's safe for babies? And the mom decided, because she loved her child a lot, she was just being careful and doing her due diligence, she decided to go ahead, and it made sense to her. She put her baby on Juice Plus, just opening up the dried powdered produce from the capsule, just putting it into the baby food. That was the last hospital admission. There were no further hospitalizations, and that's been, well, this is not a baby anymore. It would be probably an athlete running around on the field now. He'd be, probably a good 12, 13 years old now. But these kinds of stories have just touched my heart, and I think what I'd love to do is just share with folks why plant-based nutrition is so critical for human health. We're going into an age which I call the post-antibiotic era. We used to have these very high hopes that we could always stay ahead of the superbugs, the really bad bacteria or viruses or fungi, all of these things that should not be growing in the human body. Yet what we have really realized is that we've exhausted the ability to stay ahead of these super germs. A lot of these super germs are actually a result of our use of antibiotics, our overuse of antibiotics, because of creating drug resistance. The genetic material in germs changes, and it changes rapidly. And the germs that are not killed by an antibiotic are able to be much more really vicious, you might say. And so we don't want to be creating this. You don't want to be ever using antibiotics when it's not a really good reason to do so. I think everybody on the line knows that. And that's why it takes good judgment and experience and on the part of the physician and the parents working together or the patient to decide when is a rational and a legitimate use for antibiotics that causes more good than it does harm. But one of the major things that happens in addition to antibiotic resistance, by the way, I just want to share that the biggest usage in terms of pounds or tons of antibiotics that we do in our country is in farm animals, feeding it to them in their daily feed. So the use of farm antibiotics for chickens, any type of meat production, dairy, milk, and so forth. There's been a lot of talk about limiting this, this does need to happen, and right quickly, because the biggest source of antibiotic resistance is the germs in the guts of animals, that everything is shared in our environment. Genes transfer from one species to another all the time, very rapidly. So if you have an antibiotic resistance you've created by feeding antibiotics to animals because they're in a very stressful disease-promoting situation, factory farming, then you have caused drug resistance to be in the environment, and it always affects human beings, and then you have a situation where you can't treat a life-threatening infection, and it will be fatal. You don't have a drug that can possibly deal with that. But there's another, more even profound thing that happens with antibiotics, and that's killing off the essential, elegant ecosystem inside our intestine, which we now know, and we're learning more every day, is what regulates the precision of the human immune system. It is the bacteria themselves. There are hundreds of species. No one knows exactly because they're very delicate. They're impossible to culture in the lab. But we know that there is a lot of different genetic material there, different kinds, different strains of good germs in a healthy individual who has not been exposed to antibiotics. And yet when we expose to antibiotics within the first day, within the first hours, we are already changing that ecology of those hundreds of germs in the gut, and we're changing it for the worse. Even if you have an infection that you've got to use antibiotics, and that's a hopefully life-saving situation, you always have the double-edged sword. You're always going to have the downside. The good thing is to just be aware of it and try to minimize getting as sick as having to need antibiotics. And I never realized that whole field existed until I started learning about Juice Plus, and that was to rescue my own teenagers from a toxic food environment in their daily life at school, which changed their immune function. And I watched it happen, just like watching a slow train wreck. Watch my children stop eating plant foods because their tastes were altered dramatically by having access all day at school every day to junk food. And with that change in their intake, they did stop eating the plant foods they had since they were babies, and they lost their immune resilience. It only took about 4 months, and they were both having recurrent respiratory infections, recurrent bouts of antibiotics, and then the onset of asthma in my 15-year-old. And that has a logical progression to it that probably is too much to go into on this call. But the great news is that as we feed plant materials to the human intestine, as we eat plant materials, we are feeding the right kinds of bacteria and fostering the growth of those good bacteria that are not just helpers to our body. We used to think, as we started to learn more, that these good germs were helpers, that they were somehow beneficial, and that they were useful. But now we know it's more than that. They're essential. They're not optional. And when we actually lose that gut ecology, when we thoroughly wreck it with recurrent doses of antibiotics, then we create situations such as C. difficile, which stands for Clostridium difficile, which is a bacterium that occurs in an opportunistic setting of having lost the good germs that would keep that at bay, and now this is killing a lot of people in the United States. It is due to antibiotic usage in debilitated patients, and it's a vicious cycle. We can turn that cycle around and create a positive cycle, and that's what I love about the work we get to do with Juice Plus, because we are on the other side of keeping bad things from happening and a downhill spiral from starting. And I've watched this now for over 14 years, how we can they can turn their own health around by adding lots of variety of plant materials, and the fastest way to upgrade that quickly is to use Juice Plus. But it also changes taste preferences, changes metabolic programming, and allows people to be working with their body chemistry instead of fighting their body chemistry. And what I mean by that is if you're desiring to eat plant foods, if you have a little kid or a grown-up that feels like a salad, feels like having an apple instead of a candy bar, that is a huge triumph, and we watch that happen all the time. Cheryl, don't we do that? Have you?
Absolutely, right here in my house.
That's a lot of fun. So with the bacterial situation, it has gotten so extreme with loss of good germs that there's some really startling things that I like to share because the other side of it is extremely positive. So what I mean by that is, for one thing, I love to share this fact because it really brings the attention to the need to not use antibiotics when it's not in the best interest of that patient. Is the first dose, the first course of antibiotics, let's say a week-long bout of antibiotics, that first time they're used under the age of 1 year old doubles the lifetime risk of asthma. That there are two studies on that, one in Canada, one in the United States. When you use one course of antibiotics under age 1, you've now doubled the lifetime risk for asthma. And that is because of losing those good, delicate hundreds of different species of germs that set our immune thermostat, that set our immune regulation. And now we've upregulated inflammation, and we have caused a situation where we're going to have more asthma, more inflammatory conditions, more autoimmune problems, and so forth. So to me, it's a huge triumph when a family has had the experience of having no need for antibiotics in those childhood years, if that's possible. And it's not like a marker of character. That has nothing to do with it. It's having the access to the knowledge and the access to the good food, and the good food is plant foods. There are not animal foods that cause immune function to get better. It is plant foods that do that. They form a function that we call prebiotic. That's P like Paul, R-E. Pre meaning before. Prebiotics actually means the foundation or the food that the good germs must have to grow on in the intestine, and that consists of plant foods with all of their intrinsic phytonutrients and fibers and plant chemicals. And that's what makes a good environment for the good germs to grow on. There's so many of those good germs that there are 10 times more of them in the human body than there are cells of the human body. If you were to look at the DNA signal for cells in the human body, let's say you have a healthy person walking around, if you had a way to scan how many cells in that body are human origin cells versus how many are bacteria of different kinds carried in the intestine, it is about 90% bacterial DNA and 10% human DNA. Isn't that astonishing?
It is. You know, I think everything you're saying, you know, is certainly so interesting because it's something that certainly as a layperson I wouldn't have the slightest knowledge about. And that what I'm hearing, though, is that with the kind of knowledge that you have and with the product that we can have a different picture for our own bodies than many of the people, you know, that we see every day or that, you know, have the challenges, the health challenges that they do. I mean, certainly I think many of us, and I myself, I mean, we have had exposure to antibiotics because it's been kind of the order of the day. If you go into to the doctor's office, it's a very common thing for people to receive. So tell us a little bit more about how we can turn that around too. Not only does Juice Plus prevent people from, having to have so much exposure because it gives you such a great state of good health, but also how it helps us bring that back around when we have had to have that exposure.
Yes. Well, one of the lead authors in there are 4 immune studies on Juice Plus, different universities, different age groups, different populations. And for folks that like to read that kind of thing, and I think that's a small percentage of people have so much on their plate today, but if a person wants to track this down and read every word of it in the medical journals where it's published, that is available directly through the website of the Juice Plus representative that may have invited you because they care about you to this call. And in the clinical research tab at the top of their website, that actually links in by copyright agreement. I can't imagine all the work that was involved in this, but each of the 31 peer-reviewed published clinical studies on Juice Plus done by top individual faculty, each in their own field of expertise around the United States and other countries with great medical research. Each of these papers is actually able to be read in its entirety right through into that medical journal. So if you're reading the study on, let's say, one of the many studies on cardiovascular, let's say in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, the JACC, you're actually reading it in that journal, just as the physician who's a cardiologist would read that study. And the same is true of these immune studies. University of Florida, that was in young law students who experienced not only the stress of law school, but also 4 hurricanes in that particular study time. The University of Arizona, which was elderly people, that was one of the first studies done that got my attention when I finally paid attention to Juice Plus to help my children. And then Medical University of Graz in Austria, which is in elite athletes under maximal long-term oxidative stress of overtraining. And again, all of these are double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And then Charité University Medical Center in Berlin, Germany, the largest public hospital in Europe, during a winter season, and that was stressed healthcare workers. So really looking at this, looking at markers of immune function and how people did through, particularly the Charité study in Germany, how they did through that winter. Looking at things such as gamma beta T cells, really measuring function of the immune system. But one of the lead authors from the law student study, University of Florida, Susan Percival, I know had a discussion with another MD colleague of mine, and he was asking, could this marked improvement in immune function be related to or due to change in the gut bacteria? And she said, absolutely, yes, that's what she believed it is. When you change when you add plant foods, and this is also true in animals such as cows, just a really quick aside there, because this does pertain to us, people who eat meat from cows that are factory farmed, there is always a risk there of this very devastating type of abnormal E. coli. I call them abnormal because a lot of the good germs, the healthy germs in the gut, are a kind of E. coli in a healthy person. But there are strains, and one in particular that is a deadly strain that produces a toxin that it can be fatal and in a short period of time. And it would be a contamination from the intestine of the cow that was factory farmed. Well, the thing that's amazing about that is you can clear those deadly abnormal strains of bacteria in about 3 days of feeding the normal proper food for a cow, which is plant materials, not grain, not corn, but green plants or the dried green plants, which we call hay. Hay, which would be the dry form of the green leaves, or fresh leaves, either one, that will clear these bacteria. That really should be done, my opinion. I know I'm going to get on my soapbox here, so I will step off of it, but the industry has chosen not to do that. So you have these abnormal pH, abnormal acidity set up from the beginning of eating abnormal foods, which are grain, namely corn and such kind of feeds, soy and so forth, not the normal food of these cows. But the point is that you can change the population of those trillions of germs rapidly within hours. And the beauty is, as we add plant foods for human beings, we again are changing those populations of bacteria that regulate immune function in the gut, and therein lies a great deal of hope, even to the point where in an extreme setting, and I think this is a huge teaching example, is there have been people who were dying of Clostridium difficile. C. diff is what it's called for short. It's not a good bacterium that takes over. I had mentioned that earlier in people who have had rounds and rounds of antibiotics. And this is in their gut, and it can be fatal, and it kills many thousands of people in the United States per year. Well, what has been discovered is that if you can then feed that person the fecal material of a healthy human, it always would be the person that would be chosen as a donor. This is called a fecal transplant. It may sound gross, but I think the teaching thing here is huge. If you can give them a little bit by mouth in a capsule, they call it a poop pill, some people. I just call it, fecal transplant. It would be from the spouse, because you don't want to use material from a person that, maybe they have some other infection like hepatitis C or something like that, you would never want to introduce something harmful, even though this person may be dying otherwise. But this has been done successfully using a little bit of fecal material from let's say the spouse, and it has literally, it's very well documented, Cheryl, saved the life of this person who was definitely dying from C. diff. And the turnaround in their health is very rapid, within a day. Introducing a colony of these complex, delicate germs that were supposed to be there, but they were wiped out by antibiotics. So there's a whole field there. There have been people who have had their autoimmune process turned around by fecal transplants. Right now, it's tightly regulated, understandably, by the FDA. They're not allowing any of these to be done except in the setting of C. diff. Mainly, I think there's a concern that what if we gave somebody another infection inadvertently? But I do think what it shows to me is that we'd like to stay away from that severe aspect by going ahead and adding these plant nutrients all the time. Why not have, since we're supposed to be made mainly of the plant kingdom, why not have that wide variety that gives immune function the proper, I wouldn't even call it boost, I would call it balance, because people with autoimmune disease do really well on Juice Plus because there's a greater balance, a greater precision, less inflammation, less errant behavior of the immune system. So I like to say better killing power for the right things, less inflammation, attacking the wrong.
So even though we've talked about very, very severe directions in either animals or humans, what you're saying, I guess basic down to lay people like myself, is that if we take in Juice Plus, we're covered as far as that healthy bacteria, you might say feeding or creating an environment for a healthy gut, which in turn supports a healthy immune system.
Exactly, Cheryl, exactly. And we know now that very...
I will say this, if we look at, and you're talking about respiratory illnesses, I look back on my 23 years that I've been on this product, and I have to say I've never missed it a day. I'm very faithful because it's been so, the feel good has been so great for me. I seem to be one of those people that I was never, deathly ill, fortunately, but I was never well. I kind of lived in that gray twilight of the in-between as far as never being really well. But I started out my life as a child that before I was 6 months old, I'd had double pneumonia twice, and really a very, weak level of health through my childhood years. And as I grew up, I always had bronchitis and severely, at least twice a year. And I used to think that I'd gotten so much healthier because I got over it, But after I started taking Juice Plus, and I don't remember ever thinking, well, this is going to take care of that. I thought that was just part of life. And I haven't had, a bronchitis in the past, at least 22 years, if not more, because I've been on it 23. But I can't even remember what that was like. And as far as being able to depend on my health, which I never could, I can depend on feeling good every day and being healthy, and it's totally different when you can plan your life around health instead of, those times when you have to back down and not be able to do the things that you want to do because you've got to get yourself through an infection. So I know just from the logistics of living, that this has obviously showed up in a very good way for myself. But basically what you're saying is there's some very real reasons from a medical scientific standpoint that something like Juice Plus would be very powerful for our bodies.
Exactly, Cheryl. And, as you and I know, there's never been a nutritional product with the degree of independent scrutiny and independent clinical documentation that Juice Plus has. There's never in history been one that has been so thoroughly documented. I feel really good about that. And it is food and it's safe, and the body knows exactly what to do with it. I like to say it's strong enough for the elite athlete or the critically ill patient, but it's gentle enough and safe enough for the pregnant mom and the baby. So it's really something cradle, through the rest of life. And I feel that people have a right to know about it because it really makes a big difference. It may appear to be a subtle difference to people, but subtle can be extremely profound. And for many people, if they are faithful with consistently using this as part of their nutritional rainbow, expanding that rainbow, because if you're using all three blends, the trio of the orchard blend, which is the fruits, the garden blend, the veggies, and the vineyard blend, the berry blend, you're getting 26 species every day that were all the way ripened to maturity, grown by small farmers, some of them 7 generations, on the land, treating the earth, the soil well, and harvesting top quality, intense nutrition in those crops. That's what is grown for Juice Plus. You're getting that on a daily basis. I don't know a way to replicate that. And I think in today's world, because of the level of toxicity, which surpasses any generation in history that we have now, we have to have that level of intentional nutritional intensity, is what I like to say. I believe that is really necessary to keep cancer risk as low as we can, heart disease risk, inflammation, autoimmune disease, which are so on the rise, skyrocketing in all age groups, and inflammatory and infectious diseases. And we started out by saying that this cold season, or flu season you might call it, I call it respiratory illness season, it seems to be getting off to a worrisome start with increased hospitalizations for asthma and serious respiratory infection. And I just think this is such a good time to let parents and let people know that they really can make a difference in how their whole family is protected by adding something that's safe, that's food, that's proven, 21 years of use in now over 20 countries, and really doctor recommended by so many people who are using it. Doctors are using this, what they're using for their personal health protection and for that of their family. But what I love about Cheryl, too, is the children's program where it's free. And that's what made me fall in love with it 14 years ago. I heard about Juice Plus 21 years ago. Now, 22 years ago, I did not pay attention. I didn't know why that would be something that would be of interest to me or my family. I ate healthfully. I was raised to eat that way. My husband was, too. We had 4 little boys, and they had to eat what we ate, and they were doing great. But I watched things unravel rapidly with the onset of a toxic environment of food at school. And what happened with my son developing asthma, I was so humbled that would happen to my child from nutritional derailment. I thought that couldn't happen to my child, but it did, and it made me realize this is happening to virtually everyone in our toxic food environment. And Juice Plus brought him back to really good health. He has not needed an inhaler or antibiotic. He has not had asthma since 3 months into being regular with his Juice Plus. He's now an emergency room physician himself, and I feel really good that he has got a maximal degree of knowledge about all this, which he did not get from his medical training at all, but he got it from his Juice Plus experience, and he has a way of helping his body be strong and healthy through the stress that he's under, and as well as his wife, who's an OBGYN intern, and their baby, who's 2.5. They just have a degree of protection that we wouldn't have if we didn't know about Juice Plus. That's really the bottom line.
And I certainly feel like I know, within myself, just from consuming it for all these years, watching my family consume it for all these years. My daughter's baby is 3. I truly know that we have an edge. I'm one of those people that it seemed like every health issue that any family could have, I had in my family history, you might say, or the health history of our family tree was awful. And so I always felt like those monsters were nipping at my heels, you might say, those health monsters, and I haven't felt like that in over 20 years. I truly believe because we keep a really high level of good health, you then begin to relax and feel a security about that is, very, very relieving. And yet you want very badly to do something for those people around you, the people you love, those that you come across or hear about, that are having difficulty so much earlier in life. And like yourself, Candace, to watch children ill is just totally unacceptable.
It is. We know that we can help things be better, and I just think people always want the best for their children, for their loved ones, and that's why I feel so good about sharing this information. People do want the best. They do choose the best when they have the knowledge. They are going to choose what's best for their family, so it's just a matter of letting people know. I think we underestimate the power of nature. We underestimate the elegance and the complexity. There's only one kind of food that will work for human beings, and it's the elegant, complex food made by nature according to the design of our elegant, complex body. It's that whole perfect food from nature, from the plant kingdom directly. That is the only food that's going to serve us well. So any way that we can allow people to know about this, it's going to help people have a much better life, and it'll help our nation be a stronger nation and one less prone to economic, I would say misery, but it's really beyond that, economic extreme overburden. We don't need to go that route any longer. We need to take our health back, and so that's why I love sharing this. So thank you for that privilege, Cheryl.
And I know you're very passionate and committed to getting that message out as far as our product is concerned, but, that general health message that we can make a difference. We can change our own future and that of our children by what we eat, and that Juice Plus is a huge that Juice Plus fills the gap between what we eat and what we know we should eat every day, and it's simple, it's convenient, it's affordable for everyone, and it's a huge mission in itself. So we're going to lose our time here as you hear the little bells. They'll cut us off in the next minute or two, but thank you so much for your input tonight. I know how very knowledgeable you are, but I also know how very passionate you are, and that I've watched you for these 20-something years you've been with our company, just do everything within your power to, get the message out to people so that you do make that difference in their health and their health picture and that of their family and the people they love. So thank you, Dr. Corson, so much tonight for your input. And to everyone on the line, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. I had recognition tonight. We'll cover that next week. People growing up quickly through the process of our business, but also making a difference for others as they do so. Once again, it was a pleasure having you on. I'll say good night to everyone in the world. And so good night, Candace. Thank you, and thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Thanks, Cheryl. Have a great night, everybody.
And good night.
Good night, Cheryl. Thank you.
Night.
A long time. Actually, we're 44 years old. The man who started it 44 years ago is a very young man, is still our company president and owner today. And I've often said this was his baby then, it's still his baby, and he takes very, very good care of his distributors. It's always a win-win. The company, though, is one that's been extremely successful over all these years. We were actually the company that introduced smoke detectors for the home back in 1970. Obviously, that was very successful. And then as that, went worldwide over the years, we diversified. We went into the field of environment in the early 80s with water filtration and air filtration products. And then 23 years ago, entered the field of health technology with Juice Plus and the Juice Plus family of products. And what a find that has been, not only for our own health and well-being, but for those that we love and those that we come across on a daily basis. For many of you who are very familiar with this call, you know that we really strive to bring the best to you and information, inspiration. Sometimes our calls are directed at our business and how we develop our business. Many times, as tonight, it's directed toward, our product and how powerful our product is. Very simple product, fruits and vegetables and berries. Very simple product line, but one that is very, very powerful and can make a huge difference in your life and your health. And tonight we have a very special speaker and someone who really brings great knowledge and heart to our product and our